So what we'll be demonstrating this morning is the installation and assembly of a commercial truss. As you can see, what I've done here is I've gone ahead and I've laid out all of my pieces. Compared to a standard truss, there's actually a fair bit more material here. Your greenhouse drawings that come job specific for your project will give you a layout of your truss. It'll tell you all your materials and it'll tell you what fasteners you're using for each piece. As you can see, there's a lot of pieces here, so it's easy enough to get them mixed up. But what we're going to start with first is the post. And for shipping and packaging purposes, we don't generally attach these in advance. Just helps us keep our packaging a little bit smaller. So what we'll do is we'll just show the installation of these cleats first. As you can see, I've got one big, one little. Fairly straightforward. Bigger piece, it's the full width of your post, goes on the exterior. The smaller piece will go on the interior and it just fits inside the channel just like that. What we're going to use for attaching these cleats are 3/8 by 1 1/4 inch nuts and bolts. Just like so. And then we'll use a 9/16 socket and open-ended wrench to secure these. Now, one thing you really don't want to do is you do not want to use an impact driver on these stainless fasteners. If you over tighten them, you run the risk of stripping the threads, in which case, if you have to adjust it later, you just won't be able to. You'll have to break the bolts to get them off. And there's your cleats on the bottom of your post. Okay, so next we have this cleat right here. This cleat will be used to connect the truss post to the side glazing bar of the greenhouse. A quick test to make sure you've got your cleat going the right way is, as you can see here, maybe that hole doesn't quite line up. If I flip it over, lines up perfectly. This is the side of the post that your cleat should be lining up on. We're just going to use a 3/4 inch, 1/4 by 3/4 nut bolt and a flat washer. And once again, we'll just use an open-ended wrench and a socket to just tighten that up. And that's your post. So the first thing in the actual installation process of the truss is putting your posts in place. Your job-specific drawings will tell you exactly where you need to place your posts. They're always located directly beside a glazing bar. That's one thing that never changes. And to connect the post to the greenhouse itself, we're just going to use a pair of 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch nuts and bolts. As with all the other components in the greenhouse, you're just going to want to slip the bolt into the track of the bar. I'm just going to put that first nut on just real loose, just so I don't go and lose the bolt. So just connecting my cleat here, a pair of either 1/4 by 1/2 or 1/4 by 3/4 nuts and bolts, whichever one you find easier. You'll have enough of both. So once you have that in place, don't tighten these up just yet. We may have to adjust the post a little bit later as we get more of the truss in place. So once you've done the first post, you can go over and do the opposite post on the other side of the greenhouse. The next step is to install one of the corner plates. Now, you may or may not have this bent flange on your plate. All depends on the size of your greenhouse, the required snow loads, that sort of thing. So you'll see there's 3 holes here, 3 holes here. They obviously line up with each other. The key to this flange is that it needs to actually bend up and over top of the post itself. So to attach this plate, the same as the cleats at the bottom, we're using a 3/8 by 1 1/4 bolt and nut. No washers in this application. And for now, you just want to actually do these fasteners finger tight. There will be a little bit of adjustment on the truss as we go, and you're going to want to be able to move things around a little bit if you have to. So for this, we're just going to use a 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch bolt and nut, just like so. And to attach this, we're just going to drop it through this hole that's pre-drilled in the gutter. And once again, we're just going to leave this finger tight for now. We'll tighten it up again later. Once you've completed the first post, you can go off and do the second post on the other side. So once we have the posts and those plates installed, the next step is your peak plate. It will look something similar to this, but peak plates will always have this bent flange on the top with the slots cut in it for attaching to your ridge. Now, if you notice up here on the ridge, we have a set of 3 different slots. 2 of them are labeled for the truss. Depending on the style of your greenhouse or the size, you may or may not have 3, but the slot for the truss will always be identified. And we're going to attach this plate with 1/4 by 3/4 bolt nut. And in this case, you will actually be using a washer. We're going to put the flat side of the truss, curl, bends towards the back. And so we're going to go through this slot in the ridge and into the truss plate. All right, so once you have your peak plate installed, the next step is to do your top cord. Now, this top cord can be made out of either an angle or a channel, but regardless, they will always be mitered at the top to match the pitch of your greenhouse. And the top of the top cord will always be flat, so facing up towards the ceiling or the roof. It's a 3/8 by 1 1/4 inch bolt connecting it all together. And you just want to do this finger tight for now. Once again, we'll probably have to adjust it a little bit later. And that's 1/2 of your top cord. Once you get the first one in place, you can go and do the one on the opposite side. So we've got the top cords in place, we have the posts in place, we got our first sets of truss plates in place. The exact order of operation in terms of exactly which piece goes when doesn't really matter, but I like to do it so that everything's sort of suspended from the top down. Once we get sort of some of the webs in place, we can just kind of work our way through the truss. So I'm going to start with this center web, just lines up with the center holes on your peak plate. And as before, we're just going finger tight for now. It's going to put the bottom plate on. What this plate will do is ties the whole center of your truss together. Okay. So the next step is going to be the installation of your bottom cord. If you notice this bottom cord, it's got a variety of holes in different locations. Really important to make sure you get it in the right spot. Obviously, nothing's going to fit quite right if you've got it orientated in the wrong direction. So in this case, I've got an extra set of holes here. These holes here are going to connect to my bottom plate, and Rav's got that end there to connect to the corner. Same as everything else, 3/8 by 1 1/4 bolt, and just finger tight for now. Off to the other side. Okay, so what we've run into here was a little bit of an issue, and it's actually not terribly uncommon. As I mentioned before, we kept all our nuts and bolts finger tight. There's a fair bit of weight pulling down on this truss right now, and what it's causing the greenhouse to do is spread just a little bit. So if you can see on this plate, you can only see about half of the hole for the bolt. So what we're gonna do to rectify this is actually, I'm just gonna push on the frame of the greenhouse a little bit here. What that's gonna do is tighten it up and allow us to get that bolt in place. Okay, so let's give it a bit of a push, just so we can line things up a little bit. Perfect. So as you can see, just that little bit of adjustment in the frame, just a little bit of pressure to push everything together, allowed us to get those bolts into place. Okay, so we've gone ahead and we've installed all of our remaining truss plates on both the top cords and the bottom cords. And what we're going to do now is start installing our webbing. Webbing typically has 2 holes at each end, and it can be orientated each direction. My preference is always to put it so the flat side faces up towards the roof of the greenhouse. And just keep things, once again, finger tight for now. You will find as you go along here, you might have to adjust a little. And when you're doing the webbing, you don't have to go back and forth across the truss. You can just move from one piece to the next. Now, on a greenhouse this size, this is actually a really massive truss. It wouldn't be typical for a greenhouse this small, but if you had a greenhouse that was getting a massive snow or wind upgrade, or potentially if it went through engineering, you might wind up with a truss this size. One side of the truss is fully assembled, still finger tight, and then we'll move off to the other side. So as you can see, we've got all our webbing in place now. All our nuts and bolts are still only finger tight. This is a really important step we're gonna do right now. I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of weight on this truss. There's a potential that it might be pushing out a little bit. We just wanna make sure the truss is actually the right width, both at the top and at the bottom. So I just use Rav here. You just hook me on the outside of the post. Just want to verify you're good. 148.5 inches, and then go up to just under the plate. Just want to verify that these two widths are the same. And I'm about 148.75 here. Just give it a little tug. So 148.5. So now that we've got the truss all nicely set, we can go around and tighten all the fasteners. As I mentioned before, you do not want to use an impact driver on this. You run the risk of stripping the bolts or the nuts. We can go through, we can use a open-ended wrench and a socket and just tighten everything up.